This is Matt Rosen, and this is The Grit Mindset with me, your host, Matt Rosen. The mission of The Grit Mindset is to inspire and empower our listeners by delving deep into the journeys of those who have faced significant challenges and emerged stronger. Through authentic conversations, we uncover the mindsets, strategies, and lessons that have propelled these individuals to overcome adversity and achieve success. My aim is to provide actionable insights and real-world advice to help our listeners cultivate their own grit and navigate their personal and professional lives with confidence and resilience. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of The Grit Mindset with Matt Rosen. I'm your host, Matt Rosen. With me here today, I've got Ryan Blair. He is the CEO of Alloy Automotive. Ryan, welcome to The Grit Mindset.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Well, to start us off, why don't you tell us a little bit about Alloy Automotive and what you guys do?
Yeah, so we are a roll-up platform, but our niche is this focus on European, high-end European cars. We do service and repair, so we're not on the body side. We're on fixing them, keeping them up, maintaining them, so kind of like a dealership alternative, but on the independent side. And so we focus on just that European side. We grow through M&A. And we acquire shops and bring them into the fold, and we win with just super high quality and sense of urgency, and yes, just that alternative, better option.
So I've got an older BMW or Mercedes. You're my guy?
Yeah. You're tired of, dealing with the dealership, or maybe you're out of warranty and you're just looking for an easier experience. So, we still have all the loaner cars, concierge pickup and drop off, 5-year, 50,000 mile warranty. So there's no reason to go anywhere else. We're just going to make it the easiest decision you can make.
That's awesome. You guys are here in Dallas, and where else?
Yeah, we have locations in Dallas, Houston, and across Colorado for now. And always growing, so you'll have to keep an eye out.
And I know I asked you this earlier, but what's your car of choice?
Yeah, so I'm an Audi guy, so that's where I came up in my career with Audi, and so I've got an RS6 wagon, and I custom ordered it, custom color just for me, and I love it. It matches my toolbox. So
and if it breaks, you know what to do.
I've got some guys that can help me with that. Yeah, exactly.
Well, cool. You talked about coming up through the ranks at Audi, but let's take a step further back from there. What drove you to want to be in the auto repair business? Is that something you thought about as a kid, or tell some of the origin story?
Yeah, I always loved cars. I was fascinated by them, but I was really more of an enthusiast. And, of course, I came up in this era of, the Fast and the Furious, and, and so this kind of car culture. I went through life as most kids do. You just do what you think you're supposed to do. So I went to high school, and then I somehow got into college. I was never a very good student. I had ADHD and always kind of tested really well, but just lacked focus. I was the kid that never turned in his homework. I was the kid that was always in trouble, that kind of stuff. And so college just wasn't a good environment for me. And so I ended up leaving Texas A&M and going to, intentionally focus on a career in automotive. And so I went to Universal Technical Institute in Houston. So it's kind of like a tech school. Yeah. And it was like all of a sudden I was a fish out of water, and then I was like right where I was supposed to be, And so all of these symptoms of just not being in alignment, not being focused, not really knowing what I want to do. And all of a sudden, when I was in the right place at the right time, in the right environment, everything kind of lined up, and I killed it. And I was just having fun though. Yeah. So
was that tough saying, hey, I'm done at A&M, I'm going to go do something else? What was that conversation like with yourself or your family? It was
definitely tough, but I'm grateful. I've always had a really supportive family, and they're all very successful. And so we kind of joke, I'm like the black sheep of the family. We've got doctors, lawyers, astrophysicists, CPAs. And so I was like, I'm going to be a mechanic, but no, my dad is super into cars, and he was very encouraging. Is like, oh, that's awesome. That you're going to work on my stuff. And I'm like, okay. So no, it was very supportive, and they could tell I was floundering. No one wants to see someone, not be where they're meant to be.
Yeah.
And so they were definitely supportive of that. Now, I mean, by that time I had burned all my bridges and I was kind of having to do it all on my own, but that's, the price you pay. There are consequences.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I put myself into that technical school, and I double phase, which means I went to morning and night classes. So I was actually in school from about 6 a.m. in the morning to about 8 p.m. at night. And then I worked.
How long does that take, that program?
Yeah, so it takes about a year and a half-ish, depending on how many courses you take. With me double phasing the whole time, I was able to condense that down to about 8 or 9 months. And so, but yeah, I mean, so I grinded it, but I got, student of the course in every class, and it was, it was hard work, because I'm not, like a lot of people think like, oh, you're this mechanic, you had all this success. I'm not actually mechanically inclined. So learning the systems, the brain side of it, that came naturally to me, but physically doing it with your hands is a totally different skill. And it was a struggle for me. And there were guys, there in that school that were like, they've been wrenching with their dads forever, or they grew up on a farm, they're handy guys. Yeah, I'm not handy, and so it was a real challenge. But yeah, you go through it and then you get into like a graduate level program. Mm-hmm. So I got into the Audi program, and they paid for all of it. So they gave me a full ride, and I went to their facility out in Avondale, Arizona, and we got to work on just the coolest stuff. They had their hot weather testing facility out there, and so you would get to work on like the car that was in the transporter, but it's got like, call them XXX VINs, where like these are non-production cars, but they're made for testing purposes. But there were like 100 of them there, and everything from the newest, coolest stuff to your most basic stuff. And what was awesome about it is we got to tear them apart and put them back together every day.
You get to drive them as well?
I mean, yeah, you had to pull them in and out. One of the things that we had to do every day was figure out how to domino them all into the shop so that they would all fit, and it was always tight. And so, and some of the cars, didn't even have, headers on. So you're just popping open an engine as it's like you're going deaf in there. But it was just a blast. Yeah. And then they kind of place you. And so I just lucked out. I got placed at Audi Plano. And so that's where I started my career.
That's what brought you here to Dallas?
Yeah, that's what brought me here to Dallas. And so, and it started off slow. It was kind of rough. A lot of people don't know how technicians, make their money, but it's a system called flat rate. And essentially, let's say it takes 2 hours to do brakes on a car. Well, if you do it in an hour and a half, you get paid 2 hours. If you do it in 4 hours, you get paid 2 hours. So the idea here is you want to be efficient, right? So you want to be more than 100% efficient. And that way you can kind of leverage your time, right? And the better you are as a technician, the more efficient you can become. So an average technician runs something like 40 hours a week, right? Okay. And so I was below average. I ran, 20, 30 hours a week. I was a young gun. They threw me to the line, just figure it out, right? And my mentor, he worked right next to me, Stephen Booth, and he was, by then he was already probably 67. And so, but I learned from him, and I met a girl, and I was looking around, and I was just like, man, like this was my dream, right? Like I worked so hard to get here, and it felt like I was just falling on my face,
Why is that?
I was struggling to learn how to actually run enough hours to make a good living.
Got it.
And so I was just performing way below what I knew I was capable of. And I was just, I have this habit in my life, or not even really a habit, I've just noticed a pattern where I have this goal. And it becomes so clear to me that if I can just get in alignment with that, then the goal doesn't even become likely, it becomes inevitable, right? And you feel the power when you're connected to that. And so I felt that power when I was going through technical school, and I had all that success. And then I have these periods of time after I crossed the goal line, and I kind of flounder.
Is it because you needed a new goal?
You need something new. You need that new thing to go after. And at that time in my life, I didn't really know how to do that. And so, but that's exactly what I did. I got engaged. I was living in this tiny apartment. I got a little dog, and I was like, you know what? This dog needs a yard. I need a yard for my dog. I'm getting married. Like I need to become respectable, and like her parents and everybody are looking at me. And so I decided to have a little experiment with myself. And I wanted to figure out how many hours can you humanly run? Mm-hmm. And I started off slow. I was already doing about 30 hours a week. And I'll do these in monthly numbers. And so on average, I was really only running about 120 hours a month, which is not a very good living. So my first month in this experiment, I ran 300 hours. So I just immediately doubled. And then the next month I ran 400. The next month I ran 500. The next month I ran 600. And that's getting pretty close to the human limit. If you want to know, I've found the edges.
It's barely that many hours in a month.
There are, correct. And so a combination of efficiency and then just working 18 hours a day, 7 days a week, right? And so
that's intense.
But in that time frame, what I learned about myself was that these mindsets and these different ways of approaching it, where it's like, look, if you just go in and you focus and you do the next thing and you just grind it out, like I completely changed the trajectory of my life in 12 months. I went from making $25,000 a year to making multiple six figures, buying rental houses, moving into a new house with my wife. It totally changed my life. It changed my trajectory. I got put on the leadership track. I got invited to participate in the Audi Twin Cup Challenge, which is a national test for all Audi technicians. And I ended up studying really hard for that. And everyone in the country does this online test, and they pare it down to 40 people. And you go and you get tested live on bugged cars. And there's people watching, cameras, everything. And I've gotten to the final 40 my first year, and I was really proud. And I bombed. I had like a panic attack.
Oh, no.
And but I rebounded. I was like, okay, next year. And I went back, and then I got like, I don't know, maybe 20th. And I was like, okay, what do I have to do in order for winning to be inevitable, right? Like everything can be broken down backwards into just what do I have to do on a consistent basis. And so I studied, I worked really hard, and then went back and ended up winning it. Nice. And that was kind of like the cherry on top of my sort of career with Audi. I'd become one of the most successful technicians in the country. I had proven to myself mostly that I could grind out and run these hours, and ended up averaging about 500 hours a month for the rest of my career, which was pretty great.
So what did you tell yourself when you won? Because obviously you knew you'd flamed out in one of them. How did you make sure you didn't do that again? What was like going through your head?
It was just putting in the reps, right? Yeah. It's like this concept of like, if you've just done enough reps, it's just unreasonable to fail.
Yeah.
And I had been in front of enough cars, done enough case studies that when the time came and those bugged cars came, I knew them cold.
Yeah.
It wasn't even fair, right? Like, hey, that's how the cookie crumbled that time. It could have been the first car totally stumped me, but that wasn't how it was that day.
Yeah, well, so, that's a huge honor. So you were kind of top of the world at Audi, but working for Audi.
I was working for Audi, and I had this. I was kind of struck. Audi actually sent me on this like 9-day all expense paid cruise to the Baltic Sea, which was actually really fun.
That's cool.
And I'm out there, and I'm just like, I just see this flash of like, what is my life going to look like 10 years from now? And it was like, it scared the hell out of me. I was like, it's just going to be more of the same, right? I started looking at like, what are all the different side grades? What are the different ways I can go? Like, am I just going to keep grinding this out? Like, and I made the decision. It's like, you know what? I'm going to go out on my own. And so that's what I did.
Yeah.
So I literally, no plan, nothing. I put in my 2 weeks notice, and at the end of the year, so on Jan 1 of 2014, I rolled up to a little 800 square foot storage unit. And it was a unit that my dad was using. Him and I were using it, and I was working on his race car for him. And he was generous enough to say, hey, I'll let you use the space, take over the rent. And he helped me out with the lift and everything just to get started. And from then it was kind of off to the races. But I mean, this was a tiny unit behind a locked gate, no air conditioning, 120 degrees. I was the only employee.
How did you get customers to come see you at this spot?
I was very passionate, and I really knew what I was doing, right? And so people were like, man, I'm getting the deal of the century here. They're like, this guy's, one of the best Audi techs in the world. He's working on my car, paying him nothing because he doesn't understand pricing, obviously. And so, yeah, it was just a combination of just pure passion. I loved what I was doing. And when I set out, I was like, man, it's gotta be easier than this, right? Like it's gotta be easier for the customers. It's gotta be easier for the guys that I'm out there working with every day. Like, what if I start a company where all we do is just take care of the customer and take care of the people that work there? I'm like, novel idea, always do the right thing. Mm-hmm. And that's what I did. And so I didn't know anything about business. But it grew because I was passionate, and it grew because, we cared and people could tell. And so just one guy at a time. I ended up hiring my mentor. He'd retired from the dealer. And so he just started showing up every day. And I'm like, Booth, if you show up every day and you keep tinkering on cars, I'm going to have to pay you. And he's like, well, don't pay me too much. I'm on Social Security. I'm like, oh. So this is my first employee, right? And from there, it just kind of grew. I brought on some guys from the dealer that I knew, moved into slightly bigger storage units.
You get air conditioning?
Well, no. We built a half wall, put it on casters, attached it to a hinge, and put in 3 window units, and it did cut it down a bit. So we
like
went
120
from
to 105.
120 exactly. That was exactly about what it is, which was enough, at the time. And you're working all night long on these cars. I would have my dog out there, with me, and so we just kind of cobbled together more storage units as we grew, and then things really started to take off, and we moved into a 20,000 square foot flex space. I had to do all sorts of shenanigans to get into that unit because I could definitely not afford it. But I started a performance parts company, and I started a detail company and a custom air ride company by partnering with some local businesses. And then I took all their P&Ls and I went to the landlord and I was like, look, and he was like, go for it. And so I immediately started hemorrhaging about $50,000 a month.
Wow.
And by this time it was about 2017. And this is when I would say things got really hard. Before that, things were challenging, right? I mean, I never really made any money in the first 3 years, but I wasn't losing money. And, I wasn't, it was hard work, but it was the work that I was used to doing. I was used to working long hours at the dealer, turning wrenches, and that was just what I did. And so now, all of a sudden, I went from being in a position where, you know what the enemy is every day, right? You wake up and you get in the boxing ring and you're like, okay, he's right ahead of me. You can see him, you can fight cleanly. It's a clean fight. And business it's not a clean fight. You've got an invisible enemy. You don't know where to turn. You're getting punched left and right. You don't know where it's going to come from next. And the whole time you're supposed to know where I'm supposed to go. And I was just getting beat up out there. And so this was when, things really went off the rails. So, and things just start happening in business when you can't make payments for your parts. I started getting in trouble with, taxes. I didn't know how I was going to, I never knew how I was going to make the next payroll. And things got, pretty dark in that time.
And how many folks did you have working for you at that time?
So by then I probably had about 15, and we were at that big location and we had done a great job. I mean, the math that I had done beforehand said that it should have worked, but I did that math. I did grow the business to the level that I intended to grow it, and it wasn't enough because I wasn't savvy enough. I didn't really understand overhead. I didn't understand that my principal payments on my debt aren't on my P&L, right? And so when you have $50,000 a month in principal payments, you got to make $50,000 net before you even break even. And then, the IRS thinks like, hey, you're doing pretty good. I'm going to tax you on that too, And so you just don't know this stuff. I did not know this stuff, right? And so, I sold all my rental properties. Then I sold the house I was living in, and my wife and I moved into a 1-bedroom apartment right across the street from the shop. I sold our cars. I walked to work. I sold my toolbox. And I did, I cleaned us out. 401ks, everything. I think the final straw was I cleaned out my wife's 401k to make a payroll. And I still remember, like, I think we were in Vegas for SEMA because it was part of the job. And I just, when you look at someone and they expect you to be there to protect them and keep them safe, and you realize that you have, you've let them down, it was just one of the worst moments of my life, right? And I remember getting back to work and just feeling so overwhelmed with everything. I remember this specific moment where I crawled under my desk at the shop in my office, and I remember being in this fetal position and just being like, just the weight of everything, just everything left and right. There's lawsuits. There's, at this point, you've got, everyone wants their money. I borrowed friends and family money. People were trying to help me out. And I just, the weight of it was, I was like, just waiting for it to kill me. It felt like it was going to kill me.
And that's really rough. So what did you tell yourself that turned it around?
So there was something that just kind of happened, when all that pressure was coming in, and I just had this sort of paradigm shift where I think I really thought it was going to kill me. I think I was like, okay, I'm just ready to die. And and then as I sat there in that thought, just like waiting for the death, it wasn't coming. And I was like, okay, like, I guess it can't kill me. And something about that triggered something in me. And my next immediate thought was like, well, if it can't kill me, then how is it serving me? And it immediately flipped around, and I was like, there's no way that I'm going to let this get in the way of what I need to do. And a lot of people don't believe me, but that was the last time that I remember experiencing the emotion of anxiety. And from that point on, it was like, hey man, if this isn't what's going to get me there, I don't need it. It's a false reward to prevent me from taking responsibility. And I was going to be responsible. I was going to be honorable, and I was going to do whatever it took to win.
So what did you do? You got out of the fetal position?
I did.
You didn't die.
I didn't die. I stood up, and the very first thing I did was get really humble. Mm-hmm. And I went and I looked and asked for help. And I found a mentor, a great man named Aaron Stokes, and he was out in Tennessee, and he tragically passed away 2 weeks ago. So
I'm sorry to hear that.
It's a little fresh, but he saw right through me. He saw my pain. He saw everything I was going through, and he had a model, and he had success. And I just was like, you know what? That's it. I'm just going to do that. I don't need to know everything. I don't need to be the smartest guy in the room. I'm just going to go and do whatever it takes. And it's funny, he gave me a list of like 30 things. He was like, if you do these 30 things in the next 30 days, maybe you can avoid bankruptcy. And he's like, but I don't think you could do this. This is no one could do this, right? It was like, but you know what? I want to help. I'm not charging anything. I hadn't joined his program or anything. He spent like 5 hours with me on a Saturday, just bam, 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 bam. And I was like, no, I am going to do this. So I just went in, and I just had that faith that I was like, hey, no, this is that path. And I just did it. But what was crazy about it is almost everything on that list required me to look at a belief that I had and ask myself, like, why do I believe this? Like, how does this pertain to like what I'm doing? And everything, all these decisions, all these like actions I had to take were flying in the face of strongly held beliefs, that things that I thought were like, no, this is the way you have to do it, or this is it. And so,
can you give an example?
Yeah. So like an example is I really thought that I wanted to pay my technicians salary instead of paying them on the flat rate. So, which is ironic because I had so much success on the flat rate, but for some reason I thought, well, I'm going to do it better than the dealer. And, and I thought I was, reinventing the wheel. And he was like, no, like, why would you not want them to share in the success of the business? Right. I'm like, well, of course, like, I had success on this. And that was just one small thing, but I had to learn everything. I mean, I had to learn financial statements. I had to learn marketing. I had to learn recruiting. I dived deep into personal development, leadership, everything that was going to be necessary in order to win in that scenario. And I just went all in. The truth is, what I'm so grateful for is that I had nothing to lose. It's so funny. Some people, they're just not hurting enough to do what's necessary to get to where they really want to go. But I'm like, I was having all the pain, and so there was no way I wasn't going to go all in.
Yeah, I find that for whatever reason, we as humans do our best when our backs are against the wall.
Yeah.
I don't know why that is, but
yeah, maybe it's just something built in. And then you have to figure out, that you make sure you don't create chaos so that you can be the hero, and so on down the path. But yeah, that's, and it took me, I was probably at the time about negative, a little over 1 million on my balance sheet in equity, right? I mean, I was in the hole.
Yeah.
And it took me a couple of years to really dig out, but I dug out in about 2 years, everything paid off. And then it was just going gangbusters. And I actually had so much success. Of course, I joined his 20 group, which turned into a mastermind group. And then he asked me to coach. And so I started coaching and helped grow that community to now it's over 1,000.
These are independent
shop owners.
That's awesome.
And coached there for about 5 years. And then that's also where I met my business partner.
Okay.
And she was coaching there as well. And, and that's the fairy tale, ending of it all.
And you went from one shop and 15 people, and where are you today?
Yeah. So now we have 11 locations, about 150 people.
Wow.
So about 10X, right? And that was 2017. So in a good amount of time. And
that's an amazing story.
Yeah.
That's really cool. You're on the grit mindset. So I ask every guest, what does grit mean to you? You told a great story about it, but
yeah, for me, it's never believing that anything is impossible, right? If one thing I've learned is like every time I've set myself out to do something and I turn around and I look back at the path, I realize that if anything, I set the bar too low, and I think people give up before they even start. If nothing is impossible, then, you've got the drive to get to any height. And for me, that's what drives me. It's that I'm doing something that's never been done. Like that's what I really get excited about. And that's what's given me the, I just can't quit. I don't have it in me. So I think I learned a lot of that from my dad.
Yeah. It sounds like he was a pretty important role model for you along the way.
Yeah. He taught me the work ethic, and it's just, an incredible support for me throughout the whole time as well. And, but mostly it's just, how to be an honorable man. And I tell people this all the time. It's like, I'm a compromising person, but I am uncompromisable. Right. And the fact that I'm a nightmare to negotiate with, because I will walk away. Like, I do not care. Right. Like I will always do the right thing, or the thing that is in alignment with my vision and, what's best for my people and my family. And being in such a position of strength and confidence, I'm just super grateful for it. And that's been earned, through, going through everything that I've gone through. And it just allows me to continue to move the needle. And I'm also really grateful for, I've had this just innate ability to just disidentify with whoever it was that got me to that stage in my life, right? Like I was the failed student, and then I was the mechanic, and then I was the, small business owner, and then I was, the business coach, and then, and now a CEO of a company growing into the middle market, right? And in each stage, I think a lot of people get hung up on, well, this is who I am. I'm that guy. If I wasn't able to let go of just being that guy that puts supercharger systems on R8s and DFW, and everyone makes me feel good about myself. Like, if I wasn't able to let go of that, I never would have been able to get to the next level, and the next and the next. And so for me, just naturally being able to let go of those things so I can move into what it is, I get really excited about trying to figure out, what do I need to know? What do I need to learn? What skills do I need to put together to succeed at that next level?
Yeah, what would you say to those out there? Because, there's obviously all this talk today about AI taking a lot of the white collar jobs, and people are, pivoting more into, blue collar, more hands-on type careers. Yeah. What would you say to those that are out there thinking about a path like that? Because you're obviously an example of someone who went that path, but has ended up very successful.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a huge proponent of the trades. Yeah. I think, you see it so often, and you see it in your families and all around, someone, they go to school, 4-year degree, and, and not that there's anything wrong with it, but now they're working at Target, and it's not what they dreamed of. It's not what they thought it would be. Right. And that's the unfortunate outcome for a lot of people that go through a traditional 4-year institution, and then they're locked in with a lot of debt, and that just comes with this heavy weight, and people feel like they can't have the American dream. They're locked out of being able to buy a home or buy a car, or basic necessities. And what's so great about the trades is that you trade your skill and your talent and your time for an outsized return. Yeah. And, there's very few careers where you can leverage that. And, real estate being one that's highly leverageable, right? But out of that, being an electrician, plumbing, HVAC, being a technician, in any capacity, you get to be the master of your own destiny. How many careers out there allow you to say, this is what's necessary in order to win, and you just go do it, and you win. It's easy to earn multiple 6 figures in the trades, and that's a good living, and that's, you can have your slice of, the American dream, right? And I think providing that opportunity for people is one of the main drivers of what I'm doing. I don't have a single technician or service advisor or salesperson that works for me. Not a single one of them makes less than $100,000 a year.
That's awesome.
And a lot of them earn double that and more.
That's
right?
Great that you provide those kind of opportunities for
absolutely.
folks. So as we're kind of wrapping up this week's episode of the Grit Mindset, I have 2 questions. What would you tell your younger self that you know now? And then any final words of wisdom to share with our audience?
I think it's interesting, memory it's a reconstruction of the past through the lens of the present, right? And so honestly, I wouldn't tell that guy anything, because what he went through and what he needed to learn and the path that he was on is what allowed me to be where I am today. And I genuinely look back on it with, nothing but gratitude. And, you know, everything that seemed to be a blow, everything that seemed to be an obstacle, you know, you have the choice of looking at what was that doing for me instead of, you know, how was it happening to me? And anytime that you can separate yourself from, you know, this victim side of the equation into, you know, the one that's actually being in control, you know, everything comes down to choice. We get to choose how we respond to everything that happens in this world. And that choice is our autonomy. And if you let go of that choice, then you're giving up your power. And that's my only advice is, you know, recognize that you have the choice first, and then cherish that. Because that's the difference between really living and just kind of letting life bounce you around.
That's really sage advice. It's like you can't choose what happens to you, but you can choose your reaction to it.
Yep.
Well, Ryan, thank you for coming on The Grit Mindset. It's been really awesome getting to know you and hearing your story. Super inspiring. For our listeners out there, hopefully you can take a lot away from Ryan's life lessons and what he went through. What a great story. That'll be it for this week's episode of The Grit Mindset. This is your host, Matt Rosen, signing off. And stay gritty.